Our country was rocking along. We were minding our own business. Our budget was about to run out. We were negotiating with the Democrats. And at the last minute, and we said, look, let's just extend the status quo. We're not asking you for anything else. And at the last minute, Senator Schumer came forward and said, I'm going to shut it down if you don't give me $1.5 trillion and extend the Obamacare subsidies, and I'll tell you how to spend the $1.5 trillion. Well, I remember thinking at the time, look, I'm not Bambi's baby brother here, and Schumer knows I'm not. And my Senate colleagues in the Republican side felt the same way. It was an unserious offer. So we just shut it down, and we never budged. Well, about halfway through, Schumer said, I'm out on a limb here. The Republicans aren't going to budge. I can't get in to see President Trump. So he started looking for a way out. And I think the way out, the 8 Democrats that supposedly broke from their party, I think it was much more carefully orchestrated than they're letting on. Senator Schumer could have gone to these 8 Democrats and said, look, if you do this, I'm going to punish you the rest of your natural life. He didn't do that. I think he was relieved to allow it to happen.
All right, guys, this is the Rubin Report. I'm Dave Rubin, and joining me today is Louisiana Senator and author of the new book, How to Test Negative for Stupid, Senator John Kennedy. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Thanks for having me, Dave. I love your show.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, can I leave all the wit to you today? Because we play clips of you probably 2 or 3 times a week, usually on Fox News, sometimes on some of the other channels, just coming up with these one-liners. And that's really where I want to start today. Where do these one-liners come from? Are they prepackaged? Are they ready to go? Or are they just coming out of your brain as you're live on air?
Well, first, if people don't like what I said in the clips, I deny everything.
Fair.
Number 2, I don't know, Dave. You know, I read a lot, and God blessed me with a good memory. And I grew up in a small town. A lot of my approaches, my perspectives are a result of that. You know, God, I probably sometimes talk too much, but God gave me the right to remain silent, but not the ability. I do bite my tongue. I don't get nearly enough credit for the stuff I don't say. But, you know, I was sent to Washington not to necessarily make friends. I don't try to make enemies, but not to make friends, but to do what I think my people want me to do, and that's what I try to do. I also think that when I've got a few minutes to talk to the American people, I want to speak plainly and frankly, because most Americans they don't read Aristotle every day. They don't have time. They're earning a living. They get up every day. They go to work. They obey the law. They pay their taxes. They try to do the right thing by their kids. So when they've got a few minutes to listen to the news, I want to give them the straight scoop. And that's what I try to do. And some like it and some don't. People, my friends ask me all the time, they say, you know, how do you sleep at night knowing that some people don't like you? And I tell them the truth with the fan on. You know, you can't make everybody happy in this business.
Indeed, indeed. One of the things that I like about you a lot, not only the sense of humor and that, you just have sort of an everyman quality about you, is that your political journey, I mean, you were a Democrat also. I was obviously a Democrat. You defected a little bit earlier than me. What was it about the Democrat Party back then, and this is sort of early-ish 2000s, that you saw happening that forced you to leave and become a Republican?
Well, everybody in Louisiana was a Democrat, mostly a conservative Democrat until 2004, 2005, something like that. My first job in government was in state government, and I worked for a Republican governor. So party wasn't that big a deal. But gradually, the foolishness from the national party seeped in to the Louisiana Democratic Party. And the Louisiana Democratic Party, like the National Party, took a hard left and kept driving. And I just reached the point where I was the state treasurer. All of my legislation was being handled by Republicans, even though I was a Democrat. And my Democratic colleagues didn't like me because I wouldn't toe the line. So I said, okay, no mas, I quit.
So when people hear you say conservative Democrat, those things come off these days as completely antithetical. But what you're talking about, in essence, is sort of what we used to call blue dog Democrats, I guess. Or so what do you think happened to the party itself? Because now it clearly now there's just virtually no moderate Democrat left. I always point to John Fetterman as kind of the last man standing. But what do you think really happened there?
Well, the parties change constantly. And over a period of time, the loon wing, the Bolshevik wing, the socialist wing, whatever you want to call it, of the Democratic Party gradually became ascendant and took power. Now, all Democrats are not members of the socialist wing, but more and more are each day. And those who are more traditional Democrats, a number of them in the Senate, are scared to say anything. A best example is probably Senator Schumer. The leader of the Democratic Party is Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. She's backed up by Senator Sanders, but Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez is, in my opinion, is running for one of three things. She's either running for Speaker of the House, she's running against Chuck Schumer for the United States Senate, or she's going to run for president. And her wing of the party is clearly in control. I think it's bad for the Democratic Party, but they've got to make that determination for themselves. I don't think most Americans, I don't think most Democrats, or at least a lot of Democrats, hate George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or Abraham Lincoln or Dr. Zeus or Mr. Potato Head. They don't think they're racist. I don't think most Americans, and frankly, most Democrats, think that our kids ought to be able to change genders at recess. I don't think most Americans or most Democrats hyperventilate on their yoga mats if you use the wrong pronoun. But the loon wing of the Democratic Party does, and they're running the show, and everybody else is scared to death of them. That's why we had a shutdown.
So I want to get to the shutdown in a second, but interestingly, you made a point that I've brought up a couple of times over the last few months, which is I have huge political disagreements with Schumer, but I don't think he hates the country. And I think if this was 20 years ago, he would have just been a moderate Dem, but he's sort of afraid of his own shadow. Are the ones that you call moderate, the Democrats that you now call moderate, do they privately acknowledge what's going on with the party to you, and they just are afraid when it comes to the public battles because they see they've lost the base?
Well, yes, some, and not in so many words. But number two, you learn pretty quickly, you know this, Dave, in politics, what you do is what you believe, not what you say. What you do is what you believe. Everything else is just cottage cheese, man. And I watched what my non-loon wing Democratic colleagues in the Senate do, and not what they say, and they go along. And they have been. It started under it really started under President Obama, but it really accelerated under President Biden. A lot of Democrats in the Senate understood that President Biden was making a huge mistake by opening the border, and President Biden was told to say, not these are my words, not his, that vetting people at the border is racist. Now, I happen to think it's prudent, and most Americans do. But the more moderate Democrats in the U.S. Senate never said a word, not a peep, until the end when they realized that they were in political trouble. And even then, they were very tepid in their criticism.
So let's talk about the shutdown for a minute, because over the last couple of weeks, we played a couple of videos of yours, and you basically laid out exactly what was going to happen and how it was going to wrap up, and you pretty much got it all right. So is that just from you've been through these fights before and you sort of saw an election coming in New York and Virginia, the Dems needed a little bit of juice for it, and that you just knew what the landscape was going to be because you've been in the game?
I think, look, Stevie Wonder could have seen this one coming. You know, our country, 7 weeks ago, our country was rocking along. We were minding our own business. Our budget was about to run out. We were negotiating with the Democrats. And at the last minute, and we said, look, let's just extend the status quo. We're not asking you for anything else. And at the last minute, Senator Schumer came forward and said, I'm going to shut it down if you don't give me $1.5 trillion and extend the Obamacare subsidies, and I'll tell you how to spend the $1.5 trillion. Well, I remember thinking at the time, look, I'm not Bambi's baby brother here, and Schumer knows I'm not. And my Senate colleagues in the Republican side felt the same way. It was an unserious offer. So we just shut it down, and we never budged. Well, about halfway through, Schumer said, I'm out on a limb here. The Republicans aren't going to budge. I can't get in to see President Trump. So he started looking for a way out. And I think the way out, the 8 Democrats that supposedly broke from their party, I think it was much more carefully orchestrated than they're letting on. Senator Schumer could have gone to these 8 Democrats and said, look, if you do this, I'm going to punish you the rest of your natural life. He didn't do that. I think he was relieved to allow it to happen.
Yeah, and again, I fully credit you, because we played a video a few days before it happened where that's exactly what you said was going to happen, and that he would vote no, and then they would jump over. It would kind of have him save face. Not that it's gotten him any credit with the far lefts on his side. Let me ask you about a couple of the issues of the day, because one of the big things that's popping up right now, in light of the radicalism of the Democratic Party, is that Trump is calling for an end to the filibuster. I know that there's a philosophical argument here and then a sort of realpolitik argument. And I'm caught between those two arguments. I don't want to take power when we have it just because we have it. And on the other hand, I know they would do it. And I know they would pack the courts and do all those other things. So where do you fall on this?
I like the filibuster. And I've told the president that. I've explained to the president that in my judgment, the role of U.S. Senator is twofold. Yes, it's to advance good ideas, but it's also to kill bad ideas. And that's what the filibuster allows you to do. Had we not had the filibuster when Joe Biden was president, God help us all. I mean, we killed a lot of bad ideas and a lot of bad nominees. Now, the president makes a very salient point. He says, Kennedy, but when the Democrats get back in control, they're going to do it. He may be right. But my response to him was, well, let's don't let them back in control. Let's don't let them back in control. And I said, let's get together and win the midterms. One of the things we can do to do that is to pass another reconciliation bill. We passed the one big, beautiful bill, Dave, without a single Democratic vote. We can do 2 more reconciliation bills. But for 7, 8, 10 weeks, maybe longer, the Senate Republicans, we've just been sitting around, pondering our navels. We haven't done anything. And we need to get up off our ice cold, lazy butt, start on another reconciliation bill, welcome the Democrats' support, but we don't need it. And we need to address the cost of living in America, that cost of housing, the costs that are added to goods and services through regulation. We need to address taxes. We need to address other issues that people worry about when they lie down to sleep at night and can't. And if we get some things passed, once again, we don't need any Democratic votes. Then I think the president will feel better and American people will feel better.
What do you make of what I would say is a certain impatience by some people on the right, a little bit out of the base, that they want everything to happen quicker? I mean, on my show every day, it's very easy for me to talk about the administration wins because there are so many. But I'm
Mhm.
sensing a certain portion of the right just wants more done quicker, particularly on the economic side. You just mentioned, getting young people into the economy. I
Mhm.
mean, do you think that's legit? And what can be done really quickly? I mean, if you were president right now, what would you be doing?
I don't blame folks for being impatient. I'm impatient myself. But you've got to worry about the short term. But remember, the long term is important too. And I think about what would happen if the Democrats ever did get back in charge. And that's the day I prepare for. If I were king for a day, what would I do? I would, in terms of housing costs, we've got a supply problem. I would turn to every major Democratic city and Republican city, but there are not many left in the country, and say, look, if you don't increase housing starts by 5% every year, I'm going to cut your federal funds. If you do increase them over 5%, I will give you a little extra money that I will take from the states and the cities that refuse to increase their housing starts. The message that will help housing immensely. It will help housing immensely. I would talk more if I were the president. He's doing a lot. He's just not talking about it. I would talk more about the massive undertaking that the Trump administration is doing to cut the cost of rules or to cut rules and regulations. That's one of the things that's making the American goods and services cost so much, because all the cost of regulation gets added on. I would take a hard look at another reform of the tax code that stimulates, in particular, small business people. We passed a rule that said to help small businesses, you don't have to pay. If you're a sub S or an LLC, you don't have to pay taxes on 20% of your income if you leave it in the company. I would double that. They're just, and we can do that in a reconciliation bill without any Democratic votes. And I'm frustrated, as you can tell, that we don't have that bill ready to go. But I've argued with our Republican leadership in the Senate. I'm not, putting anybody down, but I argue repeatedly with Senator Thune and others and say we need to do this. I don't think I've convinced them yet, but I'm going to chase them like they stole Thanksgiving, man, until I get them to agree with me.
Let me just spend the last couple of minutes on the book, because I really did think that the title is just fantastic. How to Test Negative for Stupid, and I think people that know you understand where that title kind of comes from. But one of the bullet points is that it's a field manual for understanding Washington. What do you think, if there was one thing that the average person that kind of pays attention to politics, but not the way you might or that I might, but that just kind of is paying attention, what is the one thing that they don't understand about how it all works or doesn't work that they should understand?
Well, this explains a lot. I would explain to them that in Washington, D.C., normal is a setting on the clothes dryer. In Washington, D.C., common sense is illegal. It doesn't have to be. If we had a return to common sense, you'd have better government. And that's why I've said repeatedly in the book, the water in Washington, D.C. is not going to clear up until you get the pigs out of the creek. It's just that simple. I try to make that point in the book. It's not a policy book per se. It's a story book. I talk about policy through stories. Some of the stories will make you laugh. Some are deeply bizarre. They're all true. And I think the book I hope it'll make folks think, understand how we can fix it. Might make people laugh a little bit, might make them day drink. But everything in the book is true. And I do it through actual stories and experiences that I've had.
It's a good book if someone starts day drinking while reading it. That kind of
Well, it's unvarnished, man. I mean, it is unvarnished. I talk about President Trump, President Biden, Chuck Grassley, Xi Jinping. I met with him in China. I talk about Chuck Schumer. Everything in there is true.
Well, we'll end with this then, because my team gave me, I told you, we're always playing all of your fun quips on TV all the time, but my guys gave me a whole bunch of your quotes, and I want to see if we can work through this one,
Okay.
because it's related to what I had for lunch today. You said Democrats are the well-intended arugula and tofu crowd. I'm big on arugula. I don't like tofu. I had a steak, but I like arugula. What lettuce should I be switching to?
Well, don't switch to kale. Okay.
Kale would be worse. That's right. That's right.
Kale to me tastes like I'd rather be fat. You know the way, Dave. Here's how you cook kale. You cook it with olive oil because it slides more easily out of the pan into the garbage can. Okay. Look, I used that obviously to make a point. The other night I said something about people who have blue hair and like organic broccoli, and I got all kind of text messages. I like broccoli. Okay, eat broccoli. You get the point. But don't carry an NPR tote bag. That's one. No. That's a hard and fast rule, man.
And that seems like the appropriate way to end an all too brief interview. Senator, I hope we can do this again in person. Maybe I'll come to the swamp and we'll see if we can clean it up a little bit.
I'd love to have you come, man. You're a total banger. I love your show, Dave.
Oh, thanks so much, Senator. Enjoy it. And the book, the link is right down below. Thanks, everybody. If you're craving more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics, check out our politics playlist right here. And if you don't want to miss any future videos, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell.
You're soon going to have vaccines for cancer, heart disease, everything. So that 5% is taken care of. Now, the remaining 95% of even the genetic mutations are not fully penetrant, which means they don't guarantee the disease. They can be modified by mind-body practices, meditation, spiritual experience, but they can also be modified through other things like sleep, good sleep, like stress management, like exercise, like healthy nutrition, sometimes with certain supplements, emotions, relationships, biological rhythms, circadian. You know, when people have jet lag or they're working at night, their rhythms get out of whack. So when we know all this knowledge now, we know that 95% of disease is preventable, it's predictable, it requires your participation, it's a process, and many diseases are now reversible.
All right, I'm Dave Rubin, and joining me today is legendary author, speaker, and spiritual guru Deepak Chopra. Deepak, I feel like I could have given you a much, much longer intro there. 90 plus books, Chopra Center. You've helped heal and spiritually connect literally millions of people for decades now. What do you consider yourself first professionally?
You know, Dave, I'm still trying to figure out what I'll do when I grow up. I don't know. Jack of all trades.
Jack of all trades. Well, I guess, we only have about 25 minutes and I want to use the time wisely. I want to talk a little bit about some of the AI stuff you're doing. But for somebody that's tuning into this that doesn't know you, I can't imagine such a person exists. Deepak Chopra, what should they think of you first? It's sort of the same question, but I need a serious answer.
So, I'm trained as a medical doctor. I'm an internist, board certified. Then I studied what is called neuroendocrinology, which is brain chemistry. I have practiced as a licensed physician, California, Massachusetts, Florida. I still hold my licenses. I do my single credits. I teach at a couple of medical schools still. And then I kind of moved on to integrative medicine, mind-body medicine, and ultimately what, for lack of a better word, spiritual intelligence, and what people call the hard problem of consciousness. What is the universe made of? And how do we know it exists? So that's where I am right now.
All right. So I think people will understand this is going to be tough to do in 25 minutes because there's a lot of stuff here. So first off, I'm going to request a second interview before we even start this first one.
Okay.
Sure. So how much of what is wrong with us physically is actually a spiritual or mental problem?
Well, that's being too simplistic. So let me get you the science, okay? 5% of all disease is determined by what are called fully penetrant gene mutations, which a gene mutation is a genetic error. So that's what, think of it, a gene as a word, and think of DNA as the alphabet. And the word, of course, could be part of a sentence. The sentence could be part of a paragraph. Paragraph could be part of a chapter in a book. The human body is an epic of biological evolution, but also cosmic evolution, from all the way from the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years, to right now. You are a timeline, so am I, parallel timeline, of 13.8 billion years of evolution. And DNA is the alphabet, which is just four letters, A, T, C, G. Am I getting too complex?
So far, so good. I'm with you so far.
Okay. So the English language has 26 letters, but the alphabet of life is 4 letters: adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine, A, T, C, G. Short. The alphabets arrange differently. Just like in English, 26 letters, you can create an epic. You could write Shakespeare with 26 letters, but life writes the whole story of existence in 4 letters. And you have 25,000 genes in your body, half of which you got from your parents. So mother gave you 12,500 or whatever, 12,000, father gave you 12,000, 24,000 genes. But in addition, you have 2 million bacterial genes. So technically speaking, you have more bacterial genes than human genes. You are a few human cells hanging on to a bacterial column. You are the evolution of bacterial consciousness. Anyway, 5% of disease is due to mutations. Think of a typo. So you have the Encyclopedia Britannica, that's your body, and there's one chapter that has one word that has a typo, and that's a mutation. And 5% of those mutations are fully penetrant. That means if you have that mutation, you're going to get the disease, no matter what you do. Those are known gene mutations. One example is BRCA gene, which is a gene for breast cancer. So the reason I mention it, Angelina Jolie had that gene or has that gene, and she had a preventive mastectomy to prevent her from getting breast cancer, which was the right thing to do. Now, where we are today with our technology is that we already have a technology called gene editing. Mm-hmm. So you can cut and paste genes, technically speaking, the way you cut and paste your email. This technology is now approved for sickle cell anemia and a couple of neurological disorders, but soon it'll be for cancer, heart disease, autoimmune illness. So those 5% of genetic mistakes will be taken care of. Also, thanks to COVID, and during COVID, people were doing a lot of research on vaccines, notwithstanding that a lot of people have crazy ideas about vaccines, but vaccines are very effective in preventing infections. And I grew up in India where, I saw people dying of polio, smallpox, all gone now because of vaccines. So you're soon going to have vaccines for cancer, heart disease, everything. So that 5% is taken care of. Now, the remaining 95% of even the genetic mutations are not fully penetrant. which means they don't guarantee the disease. They can be modified by mind-body practices, meditation, spiritual experience, but they can also be modified through other things like sleep, good sleep, like stress management, like exercise, like healthy nutrition, sometimes with certain supplements, emotions, relationships, biological rhythm, circadian. You know, when people have jet lag or they're working at night, their rhythms get out of whack. So when we know all this knowledge now, we know that 95% of disease is preventable, it's predictable, it requires your participation, it's a process, and many diseases are now reversible through these epigenetic modulations. So that's a long answer that disease is complicated, but only 5% is fully genetically determined, probably less. According to the latest statistics, 2% of disease is fully guaranteed by genetic mutations. Technology will take care of that. The rest is how you live your life, basically.
So if we can take care of through gene editing the 5%, and then if we do the other stuff that you just mentioned, eat right, sleep right, supplements, good spiritual health, and all of those things, are we on the horizon of something else that we will come to think of as human in some sense?
You will be able to extend your health span to about 120 years. And after that, probably not, because we have genetic programs for death in our body. There's a phenomenon in biology called apoptosis, programmed cellular death. And that's very good because if a cell forgets to die, it becomes cancerous. So actually, death serves a purpose. Your stomach cells die every 5 days, so you can make new ones. Your skin cells die once a month. Your skeleton recycles every 3 months, etc., etc. So death is built into our system for renewal, for recycling. And what we call physical death is the same thing. The universe renews life through physical death, through biological organisms. You know, we reproduce ourselves and we recycle. Matter recycles, energy cycles, information recycles. And now the evidence is that consciousness recycles. And if by consciousness we mean your soul, then your soul recycles as a new body, new mind, new brain, everything. To stop death would be the worst thing we'd do. We'd be mummified. We might as well be in a museum, like a plastic flower or a marble statue. So death is very important for renewal of life.
Would a fairly simple way to look at that be, in essence, if you could not die, really you couldn't rejuvenate? I mean, you couldn't reincarnate.
You couldn't. So you do need death. So death is not the opposite of life. Death is the opposite of birth. Death is the continuum of birth and death. Life is the continuum of birth and death. And it's already happening. Every moment cells are dying in your body. New ones are being born. So it's already happening. You don't have the body of a baby now or an infant or a teenager, unless you want to run for president. Then you can have an old body and then you can have emotions. So, that's a qualification to run for office these days, that you stop your emotions at the age of 8. You don't recycle them or you don't evolve. But otherwise, in a normal development process, birth and death is a dance, okay? And it's a healthy dance. But given that, you still will be able to live 120 years, die free of disease, been there, done that, have a party, and celebrate your death, which is, I'm 79 years. That's my next chapter, statistically, although I'm in good health. So I find the prospect of death and renewal very exciting. It's the most creative thing you can do.
It's an incredible way to look at it. When did you realize the importance of the spiritual element? I mean, as someone that came from integrative medicine, so you were obviously looking at the body a little bit differently than traditional Western medicine. But when did you realize that the spiritual part was so deeply connected?
So this is what happened. I was doing neuroendocrinology in Boston with the number one expert in the world. He's now 101, by the way.
Wow.
And if he finds a snake in his garden, he dissects the brain to look for neurochemicals. So we were looking at neurochemicals in the 1970s and 1980s, like dopamine, oxytocin, opiates, serotonin. Now everybody knows these things. Then it was like, oh, what are these things? The molecules of emotion, we call them. And these molecules trigger your responses in the body. So, we know that serotonin and dopamine are triggered by emotions. So your emotions and the neurochemicals and your immune system and your endocrine system, hormonal, they're all connected. So there's a discipline called psycho-neuro-immuno-endocrine modulation, which is all this combined thing. That led me to integrative medicine because my training was in brain chemistry. Then I realized that, this is all about the mind. What about, is there something deeper called the spirit? And then I realized that this is actually the number one and number two open questions in science. The number one question in science is, what is the universe made of? And without going into details, the answer is that the universe is made of nothing. It starts as nothing, and then it looks like everything. So how does nothing become everything? And how do we become aware of that? That's New York music.
No, I was saying there's something sort of deeply profound about the sirens behind you as you're explaining the meaning of life. Yeah.
The music of New York. So anyway, so what was I saying? The hard problem.
Out of nothing came something.
Nothing. Came something, not something, everything. And then came something that not only there's existence, this whole thing, but we are conscious of it. How do we know we exist? That is called the hard problem of consciousness. And so if you go on Google or AI and you say, what are the 125 unsolved problems in science? The number one is, what's the universe made of? And number two is, if it's made of nothing, why does it look like something? And how do we know that it exists? And so that's called the hard problem of consciousness. And I struggled with that along with many people, and people are still struggling. And then I realized that we are struggling with this problem because we think there's a physical universe made of atoms and molecules and gravity and force fields. And then we say, how does these physical molecules create thought, imagination, feeling, love, compassion, joy, equanimity, self-awareness, existential anxiety, the fear of death? How does matter create this? And became obvious to me, it doesn't. It's the other way around. You start with consciousness that leads to perceptual activity, which is seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling. That leads to cognitive ability, which is thoughts, feelings, emotions, desires. So in my mind, that became an obsession. And then I now hooked up with scientists who actually understand what I'm saying, because 99% of scientists think I'm crazy. I'm wacko. So, but finally I found some who agree with me. And we are tackling this problem. So I'm writing a new book with a cognitive scientist, world famous. It's called Beyond the Matrix, How Conscious Beings Create the Universe. So the universe doesn't exist in the absence of you and me. So if everybody disappeared, there would be no universe.
How much of a challenge is that in and of itself, to just find scientists who can talk about this stuff?
There's like 1%, but I've found some really good scientists. And my next book is with a guy called Don Hoffman. He's a cognitive scientist at the University of California, and he's one of the best, and he wrote a book a few years ago, The Case Against Reality, which means The physical world is not real. It's a simulation. It's like the Matrix.
The Matrix.
It's the Matrix. And he came up with the math and the physics and all that. The book was criticized, but I championed it and we became friends. And he's very credible. Now you go all the mind-body conferences. He's like the keynote speaker. And I just saw him yesterday on Instagram speaking on something. So we're writing a book together. He knows the math, he knows the physics, and I know the spiritual part.
That's super interesting to me. I often talk about on the show how, in essence, because of the phone, I mean, we're in the Matrix in some extent because we are now the battery for the digital world. So I absolutely will read that. Let me ask you something, because obviously on my day-to-day basis, I'm doing more in the political realm rather than the spiritual realm. So this is a nice break for me, to be frank. But what do you make of our, if this is a fair term, what do you make of our collective spiritual experience right now? The level of which, the anxiety that people feel endlessly, the obsession with politics, the culture wars, all of these things, the endless scrolling on the phones, the inundated, endless slamming of news in their faces. If collective spiritual awareness is a thing, if that's the right term, or if you want to give me another one.
Our collective mind, leave the spirit alone, because the spirit is infinite possibilities. But our collective mind today is insane. Okay, we have war, we have terrorism, we have climate change, notwithstanding people who said there's no climate change. We have climate change. We have war, we have terrorism, we have mechanized death, we have drones, we have chronic disease, we have polarization, because the world is being run by gangsters, and we call them leaders, but they're only interested in power mongering, cronyism, corruption, money laundering, and everything that is basically, the gangsters. They're not leaders, and we elect them, so we can't even blame them. Okay, so we're all insane. I think a few years when I recognized that, I decided to check out. I mean, I still watch the news, but it doesn't affect me because I look at it as collective insanity. And if we don't think it's insane, then we are also insane. So we're declaring our insanity. There are now solutions thanks to AI. And thanks to what we know, there's solutions for everything, collective solutions. So, you have shared vision, collective creativity, you create a spiritual, emotional bond, you have maximum diversity, another bad word these days, but diversity is the fundamental essence of creativity. Maximum diversity, shared vision, emotional, spiritual connection, complementing each other's strengths. Think of a really good sports team. If we could emulate a sports team collectively, we could change the world. But I don't see it happening. I have seen medieval minds and modern technologies, perfect recipe for extinction for an insane species.
So, well, we definitely can't end with that, but we are short on time here, and I really do hope we can pick this up for a more extended interview, hopefully in person. But so tell me this: so how are you leveraging AI to solve that, to solve what you just laid out there, which is like Deepak Chopra going dark? I can't do that.
So I have my own AI, deepakchopra.ai, but I've also created a community, deepakchopra.com, where there are 3 or 4 principles: love in action, attention, affection, appreciation, acceptance, insight, creativity, humanity. And we collectively embark on the change we want to see in the world by first becoming the change ourselves, in the words of Mahatma Gandhi. You can't create peace by being an angry peace activist. That's an oxymoron. It'll get you the Nobel Prize, but you'll never create peace if you don't have peace in yourself. Peace can only be created by those who are peaceful. So how do we have 1 billion people who are peaceful, who are creative, who have love, empathy, compassion, joy, equanimity, and who are there for each other so we can collectively transform the world? It's a dream, but, it may or may not happen, but then what's a dream for? That's what I'm doing now. At my age, I'm creating global communities of empathy, compassion, love, creativity, insight, intuition, and joy. Joy is the only measure of success. Otherwise, you wasted your life.
Do you feel at all times that you're doing it all right all the time? That, in some sense, because you are the guru in this field, that you're able to...
No, I don't believe in gurus. In fact, the word guru, spell it for me.
G-U-R-U?
G-U-R-U.
Ah.
The only guru is
as I said it, I saw what was happening there.
So, yes, let's all be gurus of ourselves. And then we have hope.
Deepak, we absolutely will do this again. I thank you just for this tiny intro. We're going to link to your AI and to the website down below. And
thank you.
And good luck. Good luck in New York with all those sirens.
Yeah, I live here.
Yeah.
I live here to see that it doesn't bother me.
Inner peace amongst the craziness. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you very much.
If you're looking for more soulful vibes to spark your inner guru, check out our spirituality playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a wide variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.
But certainly, in the recent 2 or 3 years, we've seen a massive influx of people. We think there are almost as many as 2 million new immigrants, which on a population of 27 million is a significant chunk, which has been a policy of this Labor government, including recently allowing the widows or brides from ISIS to return to Australia, which is a very, very dangerous and controversial thing to be doing, of course.
All right, Senator Alex Antic, a pleasure to meet you. I feel like I already interviewed you. We did a half hour where we should have just had the cameras rolling, but we're going to sit down and repeat a bunch of things that I think we just spoke about. But first, I should mention, so we're here in Melbourne. How was my pronunciation there?
That was good.
That was pretty good.
It was excellent.
Can you say it? Because I'm nervous for my live show tomorrow.
Melbourne is good. Melbourne, but just don't say Sydney.
Definitely don't say Sydney. I should mention you are not Senator of Melbourne.
Correct.
You are Senator of Adelaide. Can you break down? I thought we'd do a little Australia 101 for the people. Because even me coming in, it's a big country. We know Crocodile Dundee. We know Bluey. That's kind of the extent.
And spiders, I'm told, as well.
Yeah,
everyone's frightened of Australian spiders, and you should be.
Yeah.
Well, look, and look, this is going to test me as well, because my knowledge of Australian history and politics might not be. But essentially, that's right. Look, I'm a senator. Similar system to the US, but we sit in two chambers of the Parliament, Senate and the lower house, as we call it, the House of Representatives. Senators are elected by their whole state, whereas a little bit like in the US, the lower house is just elected in districts. If you like. We call them electoral districts. Each state has 12 except for our territories. And it's a house of review. We review laws and make it sound quite boring.
No, politics. No, we have similar systems. We have similar people also. And I do want to talk to you a little bit about what you think it means to be Australian, because that seems to be a debate in all Western countries right now. So we'll get to that in a sec. But why don't we first talk a little bit about just sort of what do you think the state of the country is at a moment, before we get to the people specifically? What's the state of Australia?
Well, I think this is a very different country than the one I grew up in. I grew up in the 80s and to a certain extent the 90s as well. The world's very different. The West is very different now than it was then, but Australia in particular is. We have, I suppose, you would say we are the land of opportunity in many respects, resources, natural resources, beautiful beaches. And yet, for some reason, there is this cloud hanging over this country at the moment, and I think it's across the board. I think it's all the way through the country. There is a feeling of pessimism a little bit, and that has changed over the years. I think we've seen that more and more over the last 10 years. COVID, of course, has had a long-lasting impact on the country. I think that in many respects, the country hasn't recovered from COVID. A lot of economic problems, a lot of businesses just never reopened after lockdowns, particularly in this state. Yeah. So it is an interesting question. Historically, Australians are very laid-back people. As you said, the idea of Steve Irwin and Crocodile Dundee, that is, and to some extent is, but certainly was, what Australians were like when I was growing up. Yeah. They still exist, But we are seeing an urbanisation of the population, which has changed that a little bit, and I think people are perhaps a little more reserved with their behaviour.
So how much of that unease that you're talking about is a COVID hangover? Because one of the most shocking things, I lived in Los Angeles during COVID, which was as dystopian as you could get, except for the city we are in right now. I mean, we saw videos out of Melbourne that looked like they were coming out of China.
Yeah.
So how much of what's going on in this country right now is that people kind of had it good, great landmass, as you said, laid back population, beautiful, everyone looks great here, have this weird authoritarian thing happen, and now the years out of that seem to be what's going on.
Well, I guess it depends.
From an outsider, that's kind of the way I'm seeing it.
And Americans saw that, and they saw the images, and we were very conscious of that at the time. And I think it was very important that they did, because to me, it reflected some of the things that we don't have in this country that you do in the United States, things like the First Amendment. And so we went through this period during COVID where things were pretty bleak, pretty tough. And for me, that was a very strong wake-up call. That was 12 months into this job, into a parliamentary career. And for me, it showed the very frail nature of Western democracies, Western liberalism, if you like, because with the swipe of a pen, parliaments all over the country simply handed off huge blocks of power to our public service, to our bureaucrats, who started making decisions for us. So many of the decisions you saw, such as the lockdowns that the city was put into, came at the behest of public servants rather than politicians, which was a very unusual scenario and almost a little unique to Australia. In the way in which the country is made up of states in a federation.
Right. So basically the kind of managerial class.
Very much.
You mentioned to me when we sat down a moment ago that you were put in a quarantine for 2 weeks.
I was coming back from seems incredible now, but at the time I was coming back from Parliament. And the rules in my home state there were that you needed to get it's hard to say out loud, but you needed to get a visa, almost like a pass to come home to your own state, which I put in. I gave them all the information and they said, you can't come. And I said, all right, well, I'm coming. And before I knew it, they said, well, you come back, but you have to do 2 weeks in a hotel, not dissimilar to this. Now, that hotel had a big metal fence around it, the middle of the city. It had police downstairs. I wasn't allowed to leave the hotel room, and having tested 6 times negative for COVID.
Unbelievable.
I was put into an area where there was actually COVID. I can remember vividly. So it was a sort of a parody in a sense, but I can remember vividly going. They would serve you meals, and on the first day, I had a knock on the door, boom, like that, and I sort of woke up and went to the door immediately, and then I got a phone call from downstairs. It was constable, police sergeant, something. You got up and got your meal too quickly. The person hadn't cleared the room. Okay, so next time I waited 2 minutes, and I got a phone call saying you need to go and collect your meal. It's been left out there, and that's not within the rules. So, this was an extraordinarily authoritarian approach to the problem. And I back to the original question, I do think that's left a mark on Australians. I think for many of us, it now feels as though the things that we never thought were possible in the country are possible.
So before we get to who is an Australian, what does it mean to be Australian? I have one other question for you first, which is, so you are a member of the Liberal Party here.
Yeah.
And as we discussed earlier, the word liberal from an American perspective has been completely mucked up, because now the people who proclaim to be liberals are the least liberal people, actually. So anytime I go to another country and someone says they're a liberal, I go, well, do they mean they're a liberal like for individual rights and laissez-faire economics and logic and reason? Or do they mean liberal like I'm sort of a progressive authoritarian? I think I know your answer to that, but can you explain a little bit what does it mean to be part of the Liberal Party in Australia?
Well, I'm just waiting for someone to agree to being called, authoritarian.
Right,
Somebody else.
Right.
I am actually. That'll be a one for the ages.
Yeah.
But, look, no, it is. It's a strange use of term. I mean, I think we would look at it, the Liberal Party in the sort of spirit of Mill, classical liberalism.
Yeah.
And that's the way the party was formed. It was really formed as as a sort of conglomerate of centre-right parties that had a conservative and a libertarian angle bent, if you like, and they came together after the war, and that was the modern Liberal Party. Quite different. We actually wear the colour blue as the logo as well, so it's quite you would be well understood for being mistaken for coming to Australia, seeing blue and Liberal and thinking you're dealing with basically the centre left.
Right.
But that is not the case. So, no, in Australia, that's what it means. It's interesting, though, in the sense that politics in Australia doesn't quite overlay into the United States, probably the same in Europe as well. Our politics tends to be probably a little more to the centre on both sides, I think. Our far left is probably a little closer to the centre, and the same with the...
So your far left is what party now?
Well, we would say the Australian Greens, who are our furthest left party. I mean, there are others. Of course, there are minor parties that are always on the ballot, as there are in every country. But in terms of parliamentary representation, the Greens they're an environmentalist party that has really drifted into, sort of far left doctrine of, I would say, angles that involve, all sorts of things that aren't related to the environment.
Immigration.
All of that, yeah. So they are certainly, and we do have further right parties than the Liberal Party. We've got a party called One Nation, which is a minor party that deals in sort of nationalist issues, if you like. So there's a broad spectrum. I know that's the case in Europe as well. It's not quite as binary as it is in the US, but if you were overlaying, people would disagree with this, but the Liberal Party is probably closest to the Republican Party, I'd say.
Right, which is funny. That's the point. In America, we basically now have a Republican Party that is pretty much filled with all ex-libs, and we have a Democrat Party that's now filled with what I would say are largely kind of crazy people, but we can leave that there. So, okay, so let me ask you, what does it mean now to be Australian? Because even being here just for a day and wandering around, it's a little hard to tell in a sense. The bluey the bluey sort of Steve Irwin thing maybe is not the perfect encapsulation.
It's a very difficult question to ask, because I think it depends where you're going and where you are. In the city, and I mean, if I went back to when I was growing up, I think the demographic in the city was largely the same as in the country areas. That's not the case anymore. My feeling is that really to get a feel for for what is an Australian, you almost need to get out to the country areas, the regional areas, where a lot of what we consider to be Australian is still alive and well. People fly the flag out there. If you come to Australia is one of the very few countries that still, I think, finds it acceptable to have 3 different flags on a government building. I notice in the United States, despite even in places like California, where you might see the California flag, you'll still always see the American flag. But here, you will see a myriad of, Australian, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have a problem with any of those flags, but there is one flag for the country. In the country, you'll see very much the opposite. You'll just see the Australian flag. Now, these days, the person living, the urbanised Australian is quite different, I think. They do tend to lean further to the left, and they are a mix. They're very multicultural and quite different. In the country, I think the Steve Irwin character still exists, and I think they're very real. But overall, the Australian nature is laid back. We are, very outdoors loving people. We're very laid back. People, I think, here are very forgiving as well. The other thing that makes Australians quite unique is they're very apolitical. So, there just isn't the interest in politics. In fact, I was having a conversation on the plane with some young people who had just no grasp of it, and that's fine. But that is a very, we're not quite as engaged in the political process as...
Right, which in some sense probably led to a lot of what happened during COVID, because people were kind of checked out.
I think it did, yeah, I think it did. And it doesn't take much for that authoritarian nature to creep out, unless, I think Ronald Reagan said freedom's only a generation away from being lost, or words to that effect. So, we do have that constraint here in Australia, and I think people, it would be good to see people more conscious of their freedoms and what's being lost at the moment. I think it's being lost across the entire spectrum of the Australian nation at the moment.
So speaking of that, where is Australia as it pertains to immigration right now? Because you guys are a freaking giant landmass, that it is its own continent. Most people don't realize that. You have you're an island. You're a very large island. You have no borders with anyone else. It seems like this place should be a fortress, which in some sense it was kind of set up to be.
Yep.
And yet it seems like there's also a lot of problems on the immigration.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's been historically, it's quite interesting, backlog of how the Australia came to be where it is. It's probably too long for today's conversation, but essentially we were settled by the English and the Irish and the Scottish out of Europe. And that continued really largely until around about the 60s or 70s when we started seeing, our post-war too, of course, before we started seeing influxes from Europe. There was, in fact, a white Australia policy for a long period of time. And that all changed in the latter half of the 20th century when we started seeing more immigration from Asia, and now in recent times from the Middle East and so on. But you're quite right. I mean, we had a population when I was growing up of around about just under 20 million. It's about 28 or thereabouts now, depending on where you look.
In a country that's the size of the United States of America,
pretty close.
350 million.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Now, the difference with Australia is most of our arable land is on the coasts.
Right.
So there's a lot of landmass in the middle where there's minerals and a bit of farming, but not a huge amount else, although they'd probably scream at me for that, but that is the fact. So most of it, most of the population is centred in those urban areas. So it's sort of a little bit misleading in the sense that we do have a large mass. The thing we do have is resources. We have plenty of water up north. We've got minerals everywhere. We've got some of the largest stockpiles of uranium and coal and iron and gas. We just don't use them because we are under the thumb of this green ideology, which is telling us to sort of self-harm by not using it and not burning it and so forth. But certainly, in the recent 2 or 3 years, we've seen a massive influx of people. We think there are almost as many as 2 million new immigrants, which on a population of 27 million is a significant chunk, which has been a policy of this Labor government, including recently allowing the widows or brides from ISIS to return to Australia, which is a very, very dangerous and controversial thing to be doing, of course. And so the dynamics change.
What is their argument in a place that has this many resources, that is this big? What is the argument? So we're going to bring in 10% of the population in 2 years, or
well, the argument that would be used is that COVID, there was almost a moratorium on immigration, and we need to catch up. So that's the argument. And the argument is also always about skilled labour, and we don't have the expertise in certain areas. The truth of the matter is that I think people are just coming in and working, normal jobs. And of course, the net effect of that, in many respects, has been a press on housing, a press on living standards. And there are stories in Australia now of people, places like Sydney and Melbourne lining up with 200 people for a single, bedroom apartment. So the effect on the cost of living and the lifestyle in Australia has been quite dramatic in a short amount of time. We're all very worried about that. I'm very worried about it. And of course, this country was built on immigration. So this is, as they say, not about hating the player. It's about the game. The numbers are extraordinary at the moment. The United States had this same problem. It was illegal immigration. This is legal immigration, but the effects are the same. And you have to be in control of your borders in a country like this. And I'm very worried about where we're headed.
Where does the kind of guilt about the Aboriginal population fit into this? We obviously have a version, every Western nation in some sense has a version of it. We have a version of it in the United States.
Yeah, look, it's really interesting. I saw a clip this week on social media of a journalist from our ABC going around and talking to people in the 50s and 60s about whether Aboriginal children should swim in a swimming pool with white children. Now, if you believe the left, they would say that we were a country based on racism and have always been. This is black and white footage. These people, though, responded by saying, of course they should. Why wouldn't they? They're our brothers and sisters and so on and so forth. So this construct that Australia is a racist nation has been brewing for a long period of time. It's in overdrive at the moment. I think we're the least racist nation in the world, actually. I think Australians, as I said, with that laid-back nature are very, very warm and welcoming. But the left have found a way to achieve their goals. The classic example is the Voice to Parliament referendum, which we had now. Referendum in Australia is a serious thing. It's changing our constitution. I know it happens in the US too with amendments and so forth. But a couple of years ago, the government proposed enshrining an Aboriginal voice in Parliament, which would be a sort of effectively, they would have argued, but effectively a third chamber of our government.
Right.
The Australian people shot it down. Something like 65% voted no, depending on where you go. But the rationale that was used was this rationale of guilt. You've stepped on these people for years. You need to give them a voice. Of course, it was never true. And in fact, many Aboriginal people and groups, including my friend Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, who was a leading voice against it, is Aboriginal herself and spoke against it because it's the very essence of division, effectively, giving certain people certain rights and certain categories. So we've had to fight with a lot of that. And I think Australians are waking up to it. But that ethos is alive and well in the left, and they want to push that division.
How much of this also is now that there's an integration problem for the second generation of people that have come here? I was reading even this morning about this machete ban that just was instituted in the last 6 months or so here. And it sounds like most of the violence is not from illegals. It's from second generation immigrants, meaning like 15-year-olds whose parents came here and feel different somehow or other.
Look, I think that's always been a bit of a problem. When I was growing up, there were complaints about, knife use from, second generation immigrants from Southeast Asia. So I think it has always been an issue. But certainly I think this is one of the real world effects of this problem is people do take time to accustom. They do acclimatise and become accustomed to their new environments. And many are coming from very dangerous places like, some of the war-torn parts of Africa. So, it's a very difficult balance to mix, particularly when you throw such large numbers at a community that's not necessarily geared up for that. And as I said, I mean, Australia is a sort of a deceptively small country in a very large landmass, and I think we're starting to see that play out.
Where does the Islamist part of this fall into place? Because when I tweeted out first that I was coming here, a lot of people said, Dave, you're going to have to watch out, especially, well, they mostly told me about this city, actually.
Yeah. Look, I mean, there certainly has been a wave of crime. The machete ban is one of them. Look, I don't know whether it could honestly be attributed to any one group or other. I wouldn't say that it could be, honestly, but I mean, this is the nature of taking people from different parts of the world. I mean, sometimes cultures don't always mix, and we have to be careful of that. We really do. But look, Melbourne is going through its own problems. It's got a very left-leaning government, has had for a very long period of time. And if you look around, I mean, it's a sort of a city that looks like it's in trouble, honestly.
It's funny because I was expecting that, and I've only been in these few blocks. We happen to be in a particularly nice area, and so far I haven't seen the trouble part. But everyone keeps telling me about it, so I believe it's there. I just haven't seen it.
I think it's all relative as well. I mean, there'll be parts of the US and parts.
Right, I go to blue cities in the US.
You'll be well acclimatized to it, I'm sure. But we're just not used to it. It's always been a very trouble-free country. And I think that's been part of the problem is we have thought that our institutions will always serve us well. We've always thought that there will never be trouble in this country and that we don't have this sort of social cohesion problem because we haven't. We've had people that have mixed. We had Greeks, Italians, and people from other parts of Europe that came here after the war and would have been lumbered with many of the same problems and arguments, but have assimilated well after a generation or two. So we're just not used to it. And that's just a feature of having large numbers coming in at one time, I would say.
So you guys have a Labour majority government right now. I'm not sure when we're airing this interview, but I believe on this coming Monday, your prime minister is going to be meeting with Donald Trump in the States. What would you like Donald Trump to say to him?
Oh, well, I mean, look, well, what we need actually is to keep the partnership going. I mean, ultimately, that's really what we need. I mean, we think we are an island away from everything, but we have neighbours that are not necessarily friendly all the time. So I think the most important thing is that we keep that going. We have there's this long-running debate in Australia about AUKUS, which is an alliance between the UK and Australia, and military equipment and submarines in particular, which Australia is looking to buy. So look, I hope that all goes well because we do need it. What's been interesting though is that Australia has historically, for reasons of the past, had a connection to the United Kingdom. That all sort of changed swung to the US after Vietnam, when the United States became our main ally, perhaps, and certainly in terms of military equipment and transfer, that was the main thing. We're seeing a little bit of a swing with this Labor government away from the Trump administration, I think now back towards the sort of the European elites who have perhaps more in common politically.
I assume you're not happy with that.
I'm not happy with that at all. No, I don't. I think, I'm a very strong believer in the US-Australian alliance, and I think we need it. And, and I hope that continues. But I would say that that's a challenge at the moment, because I think the Trump administration, as they unashamedly are very America first, and want to know what we can do for them as much as anything else. So let's hope that continues. But we just hope for poor old Albo the lights don't get switched off, because when the lights go off in the White House, you're in trouble.
You're in a lot of trouble, and Trump is not above shutting the lights off.
He is not above it at all.
What else should we know about this country that we don't know? I mean, we've talked mostly about problems, actually, but it is an incredible country.
It's an incredible country.
I mentioned to you that I was supposed to come back from my first book tour, which was going to be the only international stops we were doing, because I so fell in love with it when I was here in 2018. So I'm so happy to be back.
Yeah.
So give me some of the positives.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, how long have you got? We'll probably take the rest of the week to tell him. But honestly, I mean, it is a great part of the world down here. You're close to Asia, so there's all of that other side of it. But certainly inside our boundaries. I mean, you can't go past the beaches. Not so much in Melbourne. It's a bit, it's a bit cloudy. In fact, we should be all right. But other parts of the country, you've got tropical Queensland. You've got Sydney, which has the most incredible beaches. So do Perth, some of the best metropolitan beaches you'll find anywhere in the world. In South Australia, where I'm from, it's the wine regions. It's actually like going to Europe without being in Europe.
Yeah,
and
I had a great Australian Shiraz last night.
Yeah, and they're all there, and it's great. And look, I think the most impressive thing about this country, though, is the laid back manner. We have, it is a little bit like a theme park. We have thought that the world is as friendly and as generous as Australians are. Every time we travel, you see Aussies when they travel, I think sometimes get themselves into trouble because they just think the world operates like it does when you go down the road here. And of course, it's a big, bad world out there. So, but in terms of a friendly place to come, and they love Americans too. They'll tell you they don't, but they do.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of affinity with American.
Why do they tell you they don't?
Because Aussies
cool,
Aussies like to be their own thing, but they'll say all sorts of things, but of course the friendship is real, and they love hearing about America, and they love the connection to America. So Americans are very, very welcome in Australia, I have to say. So it's a good thing. But the other thing I'd say is that you just can't be frightened of the wildlife here. There are no, we haven't seen a single anything in the middle of Melbourne.
Although we are in the city right now.
It has happened. There are times where Americans think it's nonsense, but there are times when kangaroos, probably not here, but certainly in Adelaide, I have seen it. In very, very built up areas, you will see a kangaroo coming through.
So when I take my guys in Sydney, we're going to go to that big kangaroo preserve, and the koalas have.
You'll see them.
What else do I have to warn them about over there?
Almost everything. I just wouldn't touch or get near anything.
Yeah.
And there are some big animals around. You go up north, and those crocodiles are serious.
No.
Which made Steve Irwin all the more incredible that he was happy to.
We're from Florida. We got a lot of gators.
A lot of gators. Ours are bigger.
Spider situation. I mean,
spiders are out of control. We're getting them all the time. My wife has found 2 at home, and I did remind her this morning that we live in Australia. So, you're not getting away from the spiders here, but there are some really nasty ones. Anything with red or white on them, just step around.
Just step away. Does this qualify as Australia 101?
This is Australia 101.
Is there anything else that we should
covered
do?
Pretty much all of it, but what else can we cover? Nothing. I think we've covered it all.
You can only give Americans so much at once. I feel like this was
a little bit of a download.
It was a pleasure, Alex. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
If you're looking for more eye-opening and worldly conversations, make sure to dive into our international playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a wide variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. I'm very happy to be in a place, in a country, and certainly at a conference where I can say the word liberal and you guys know what it means. Because, from an American perspective, if I say to someone that I'm a liberal, and I wrote a book, my first book, Don't Burn This Book, I think is the best-selling book on classical liberalism in the last 40 years in America. But if I tell people I'm a liberal, they think that means a progressive. They think that means a leftist. And the word has just been completely mangled. So it's very refreshing to come here and even talk to some of your members of parliament who are in the Liberal Party. And in essence, they have a lot more in common with the conservatives of America. That's much of what we will talk about up here tonight. So I thought if we're going to talk about the right and where does liberty fit in this new right, and most of this, of course, I'll do from an American perspective, but a lot of it obviously translates to Australia. I think we have to start by talking about what happened to the left. And the reason we have to do that is because so much of what defines the right today, what defines MAGA, what defines Trump, what defines really the conservative movement, is a reaction to the excesses of the left. So, there's always a conversation about when did the left gain all this power, how did they do it? Most of the answers, usually there was a sort of 40-year march through the institutions that most of you are aware of. They really just took over higher education. They moved down into high schools and then really into middle schools and even elementary schools. And that's, of course, where we got all of this woke stuff and the gender identity stuff and the, I would say, upending of our history and confusion around why America is fundamentally good and what our values are and all of these things. And they did it, and not only did they do it while I would say conservative-leaning people, or in this country I can say some of the good liberals, were out there building businesses and building families and actually doing things, changing industries, all of these things. And the progressives were very committed to the cause. And I think that really is how they, in essence, destroyed or overtook the Democrat Party in America, because the good liberals, which I suspect most of you in this room probably, from an American perspective, 20 years ago would have been Democrats, maybe sort of Bill Clinton Democrats, something like that. And that was sort of the mainstream take on liberalism. But the progressives came in, and they were sort of liberals on steroids, right? Probably a little too many steroids. And they went in and they decided they would scream about everything, and everyone that disagreed with them was a racist and a bigot and a homophobe and all of the slurs. And it kind of worked. Actually, more than that. It more than kind of worked. It fully worked. They have, in essence, at this point, in 2025, purged all of the good liberals and pushed them to the right. So for the purposes of today's talk, we're talking about what's going on the right. And I'm really fascinated by this because I was a person of the left. I was in a lot of progressive circles. And about 10 years ago, I started saying, hey, liberals, we're not acting liberally. We're not defending free speech. We're silencing people. This was at the beginning of, cancel culture and wokeness and all of these things. And there was a real feeling that all the liberals were going to sort of be lost because the progressives were taking over the Democrat Party and the liberals would have nowhere to go because they would never team up with the conservatives. But then something amazing happened around 2016, really 2015, and that was Donald Trump. And Donald Trump came in and he was a Republican, so he was a conservative, but everyone knew he really wasn't a conservative, right? I mean, no one in their right mind, I think, thinks that Donald Trump is sort of a religious conservative, that he was sort of a New York liberal real estate guy, spoke gruffly, had to do all sorts of things in his previous life as a businessman and a TV host and all of those things. And he then came in and he actually, and this is a point I've really tried to make to a lot of people, and I think they get it, but it takes some time. He actually liberalized the conservative party. That's actually what MAGA is. Make America Great Again, really, is that he took the conservatives who were kind of okay with just losing elections and not really doing much. We do some nation building across the world. We do some tax cuts, things like that. But then he actually widened the tent. He widened the tent. One example would be that he is the first incoming first-time president who was ever for marriage equality. Now, that certainly is not a conservative principle at all, right? Barack Obama, liberal, progressive hero, when he came in first time around, he was not for marriage equality. So in that sense, Donald Trump was more liberal, actually, than Barack Obama. Donald Trump also, he's been sometimes he's for tax cuts, sometimes he's for spending bills. He basically has been a big mix of things, but what did that do? It basically gave a home to the disaffected liberals, right? So when I talk about the disaffected liberals, if you just look at some of the people in Donald Trump's cabinet right now, He has Bobby Kennedy running HHS. Bobby Kennedy, I mean, his last name, Kennedy. This is a Democrat. He is supposed to be a Democrat. As a matter of fact, when I had him on my show when he was running, just in this last election, or he was running in the primary, which the Democrats basically made sure that there was no chance that he was going to beat Biden in the primaries, I had him on my show, and it was the first time we met. And I said to him, I said, Bobby, you know, I don't know if you're going to be a Republican by the end of this thing, but I promise you, you will not be a Democrat. And if you go back and watch the clip, you can see his eyes light up, because he knew something was really, really rotten with the Democrat Party, that he as a liberal, as an old school liberal, limited government, laissez-faire economics, individual rights, all of the things that you guys believe in, he knew that the runway on that with this progressive movement was very, very short. And he knew that the plane would never get off the ground because they simply would not follow him. So somebody like Bobby Kennedy ends up in Donald Trump's cabinet. Then you could look at Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard was a progressive. She was a real progressive too. She wasn't just a liberal. I mean, she was on the left side of that. And she ran for president in the primary against Joe Biden. She was actually the last candidate still going. You know, they all cut their deals. Pete Buttigieg and some of the other, Elizabeth Warren and the rest of them, Bernie Sanders, they all cut their deals and they all dropped out on the same day. But Tulsi Gabbard stayed in and she fought Joe Biden as long as she could. Hillary Clinton said she was a Russian asset, all of that stuff, but she was a Democrat. She was a lefty and a liberal, and now she is the director of national intelligence. And there's many other people like this. And Donald Trump also has brought in plenty of gay people and black people and all of the other things that don't really matter, of course. And he didn't hire them or bring them into the cabinet because of their identity. He brought them in because they're qualified. And that is a fundamental difference than what the Democrats have done over the last couple of years, where they brought in people specifically. I mean, Joe Biden said specifically that he brought in Kamala Harris as VP because she was a black woman, which is, from a liberal perspective, the most demeaning thing you could possibly say to someone, right? Why would you ever want to be hired for a job because of your skin color and your gender? It's completely and utterly irrelevant. Are you qualified to do the job? Now, from where I stand, she obviously was not qualified to do the job, and I think that was sort of borne out in her VP tenure and then her subsequent campaign. But as they purged all of these people, and as Donald Trump widened the MAGA tent, that gets us to the topic today. So how do we hold a political movement that has very different perspectives, that has very different policy prescriptions? You have these liberals that are generally a little more big government. They want more social services. They're obviously more liberal when it comes to, you know, let's say gay marriage, which the ship has sailed on that, so it almost feels silly to talk about, or abortion would be a good one. You have now all of these people like Bobby Kennedy, Tulsi Gabbard, Joe Rogan. I mean, think about Joe Rogan, who supported Donald Trump. Joe Rogan is a pot-smoking, MMA-watching podcaster, right? Mushroom-eating podcaster who no one in their right mind, and probably a lot more than that, but nobody in their right mind would think is a conservative. But he supported Donald Trump. Elon Musk, probably the single best example. Elon Musk, lifelong Democrat, until the midterms before this last election, had never voted Republican once. Then finally, when he moved a bunch of his companies to Texas from California because of progressive Gavin Newsom, he finally voted for a Republican congressperson in his district, took all of his companies out of California, high taxes, high regulation, moves them to Texas. I mean, that's the most perfect example of watching the entire country sort by politics right now. But certainly would never have considered himself a Republican. And now he's in that tent. So Elon, Tulsi, Bobby, me, Rogan, all of these people that 7-10 years ago all were liberals are now part of the Republican Party. And interestingly, if you were to look at the Democrat Party, and I also have to say, it's quite fun coming here because you guys get all these references, right? Like, there's no political person from an American perspective that I can bring up that I think you guys don't know. You're following all of it. You know, everyone has now come across, and the question really is, what's left on the Democrat side? Is there any room for the Democrats to have liberals? And there's basically one. There's a guy by the name of John Fetterman, who is he's a Democrat from Pennsylvania. This is a guy who quite literally, about 5 years ago, he had a couple strokes and had brain damage. And as he has healed, as his brain has healed, he is becoming more conservative. It's incredible to watch. I don't know if any of you saw the movie Awakenings with Robert De Niro and Robin Williams. It's literally that story. He is coming out of the coma and suddenly he's like, I'm for limited government. It's incredible. But they're primarying him. The Democrats are now primarying the one moderate left in the party. And then, of course, there's a couple people in Hollywood that still basically get it. There's, Bill Maher, who's, I think, been the standard bearer for American liberalism for the past 40 years. Unfortunately, I think he gets to the wrong voting conclusion, but he's trying to stick it out with the Democrats. But now, so what do you do on the right? How do you defend individual rights? How do you defend liberty? How do you defend the things that we all care about when you're now sort of in bed with people that have different views? This is where I should bring up my friend Charlie Kirk for a moment, because Charlie, who was a good friend of mine, and we met around 2017, and we did a lot of these college events together. I was on the left and Charlie was on the right, and we debated on stage at colleges. It was before a lot of this stuff went crazy, and when we were doing it, we would go to these colleges and everybody would say to us the same thing. We would get the same criticism every single gig that we did, which was, you guys are making a big deal about this college thing, but when these kids get out to the real world, the real world will show them what's up. And what we found was that the real world basically folded like a wet paper bag, right? They actually got out of colleges, they took over all of these institutions. But Charlie did something really interesting, which is, and this is, I think, gets to the crux of the challenge that we will have to merge conservatives and liberals in a healthy way, which is really what the American experiment is all about. And it's why I say that Donald Trump has been defending conservatism and liberalism from the forces on both sides that would pull us apart. Charlie had his own personal religious beliefs, right? He was an evangelical Christian. He had his faith. He talked about it very publicly, which is really not that welcomed in most American circles, certainly not in the mainstream. So we had differences, right? He absolutely believed in traditional marriage. He certainly was not thrilled when the Supreme Court changed the law on that. But he also understood fundamentally that America was not a religious theocracy. And that's more of the liberal side of him, that he could have his faith and then also understand that America was a secular society and that it's up to you personally to figure out how you integrate those two things. Well, that's partly what I see the challenge will now be for the people on the right, because Donald Trump's 79 years old, obviously this is going to be his last term, and the Republican Party is going to have to figure out which way to go. And there are forces pulling it in all sorts of ways right now. It's quite bizarre, actually, because Donald Trump, he's only in the midst of the first year of this term. So he's got 3+ years to go. I've personally been very happy with virtually everything that he's done. But now there are forces in the media, and I would say within his own party, and I would call this sort of like the Tucker Carlson wing, that really want to push America into much more of an isolationist position. I think there's an awful lot of scapegoating going on and a bunch of other things that maybe we can get to in the Q&A. And Donald Trump, I think, has been a sort of buffer against that. And if America is going to hold, and America is going to be a place where we can have all sorts of people from all walks of life, one of the things that's most interesting to me being here in your incredible country is that, Australia and the United States, we're basically geographically the same size, but we have 350 million people. As I understand it, you have about 27 million people. Think about how crazy that is, the difference, just the density of the amount of people. And then if you really think about how America, we were the place for the last, we're rolling into our 250th anniversary next year, we were the shining beacon in the world where everyone from literally every corner on earth wanted to come to make a better life, and largely did that. But of course the exchange in that is that you're going to have people that have different religious beliefs. You're going to have people that have different philosophic beliefs, that are going to have different lifestyles and different foods and different color, different clothing and music and all of these things. And America, much, much better than Europe, integrated these people properly. I think you guys have done it fairly well. It seems, I have to say, on this trip, it seems a little different in some of your cities. I was in Melbourne, and it felt like the integration situation was not going that well. But I would need to be there a little bit more, perhaps, to see that. But America has done that, and that is the promise of liberalism. And if the conservatives and the MAGA movement is to last, they are going to have to pick which way. Which way are we going to go on this? Are we going to be an America that is going to lead the world, that is going to defend liberal Western values, individual rights, universal human rights? Or are we going to do something that is different? And again, there are forces that want to turn America more into a sort of traditionally Christian country that want to do more. There's a wing of the Republican Party. I think you can see this with a little bit of the kind of Marjorie Taylor Greens and some of the other Congress people that want to turn it into something a little bit more actually like AOC or Bernie would want, where the government is going to do absolutely everything. So Trump is basically trying to hold a very tenuous position. How do we balance all of these things and keep the widest tent possible? I honestly don't know if it's possible. I don't know if it's possible. What I've said to my audience all the time is, and what I've said to the Trump people and anyone who will listen, is that I will stake out the position to be on the liberal side of the MAGA movement. And as long as the people to the further right of that are willing to live in the same country as me, then we're going to be okay, and we can win an awful lot of elections, and we can fix an awful lot of things. Trump has largely fixed the immigration situation, and we've fixed the borders. The economy is turning around. There's a lot of, we're going in with ICE now, which I know a lot of people don't like, but we're fixing some of the problems for the first time in America in a long, long time. So that really is the challenge. Can the liberals and the people who want limited government and individual rights and understand you're going to be you could be fundamentally different than your neighbor, but that all fits within the American promise. That actually is what the founders intended. Can they fit with the forces of a conservative movement that definitely have impulses not to be part of that? That will be the great challenge. That is what I'm going to continue to do. I think that's probably, in some sense, a little bit of what your political battles are about as well. How do you figure out the blend between, if I understand it correctly, your liberal party, which is, again, closer to our conservative party, probably has far more in common right now with parties on the right than parties on the left. But if I'm wrong, I don't want to speak too much about your politics, but that's my impression so far. And that will be the challenge, really, for all of Western nations. Where do the liberals fit? Is liberal democracy something worth defending? I absolutely think that it is, and that will be the challenge.